Tifosi and welcome to the FORZA CALCIO Podcast, the show where we dive deeper into Italian football, its culture and its stories. I'm your host Luke Taylor and I'm really excited about today's episode. We're diving into La Curva, something that makes Italian football so unique. We look at the impact of the ultras, what it's like to experience a match day on the Curva, and why the culture surrounding Italian Tifosi is so beautiful yet so complex. Today I'm joined by Scott Balaam from Tibbs News and Calcio Amore, and we're also joined by Christian Waugh, a former sports journalist who's now a goalkeeper, coach and reserve goalkeeper for Lago Patria, who play in the Seconda Categoria in Italy. This was one of those conversations that dive into the culture in Italy, giving a first-hand experience of the ups and the downs following your team in the country from those who do it regularly. So whether you're a casual Calcio fan or you're like me, a diehard Calcio aficionado, you're going to want to stick around. Alright, let's get into today's episode. Before we dive into the episode though, make sure you drop a follow, a like wherever you are listening to, whether you're on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts or wherever. Drop a follow, drop a 5-star rating. It really helps the podcast grow. And don't forget to dive in, subscribe to the newsletter, and if you like it here, maybe come and join the WhatsApp community as well. It's all things FORZA CALCIO. Drop a follow, drop a like, subscribe to the newsletter, and I might see you in the WhatsApp. Okay, into the episode. Right, before we dive into the full chat, I just want to ask you both one question and see what you think. I just wanted to see, how would you describe the Curva to someone who's never experienced sort of Italian football culture, ultras culture, fan culture before? How would you guys describe it? You can, one word, or if you've got many, yeah.
An experience is what I would best describe it. It's an experience.
I agree. Yeah, it's a very special experience. Something I think when I started going to the Curva as well, like in the, I'm a little bit older than you boys, but back many years ago, it reminded me of watching football in England, like 20 years before, 10 years before, where it was still like raw, still you get that natural passion. It's something that you like, it's just a special experience whereas sometimes I feel like when you watch football in England, it's a little bit Disneyfied, and whereas with this you can feel like the energy, you love that, like the passion, the noise, the madness, like you know, like when okay, I know we get interrupted with VAR, but now you know that when you celebrate on the Curva, like you end up falling over, you're on your ass, you're falling over, like you've got like five skinhead strangers on top of you hugging, you know, it's a different experience for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely unique, and I think that's the beauty for me when you look at Italian football. One of the parts of why I love it so much is it's still got that raw edge. So, as you say, England is more Disneyfied. I do agree with that in the sense that the Premier League, especially the top level, and probably the Championship, the stadiums, and the approach to it is a lot different. Whereas when you go to Italy, and I know there's a wider conversation around how there's a massive stadium problem in Italy, an infrastructure problem, which there is. If the Italian game wants to get to where it was, it needs to, and where the Premier League is, it does need to improve its infrastructure. But I do love that it's not improved yet, and I do love the rawness of the stadiums and the sort of grittiness of the stadiums, which adds to that experience, as you say. I remember being in Verona, sat in their Curva, and it was stood in their Curva because there was no seats left on it. There was like the little plastic green seats. There was like half of they were all gone, but it was just like the experience is entirely different to what you would get if I was to go watch Newcastle play. It's just it's a different sort of vibe entirely, isn't it? It's raw, it's gritty, and I guess that's why I love it so much, and I'm guessing you guys love that side of it as well. And when you go down the divisions, even more so, it gets even grittier and even more sort of like, I think Livorno Stadium I've never been, but that looks like it's still stuck in a war zone half the time. But yeah.
Well, I think though too, like when it comes to like Curvas, is like they kind of depict how the team is. Like for instance, like last year when I went and saw Benevento play, I saw their last 2 games. It was the season finale in the Serie C playoffs, and they played very bad, and the fans had a banner out and they split up, and once the game was over, there was just the banner, you know what I mean? Like they depict how things will be. And I think that's a very interesting thing about the Curva is, and I think that it brings a different element to it. You know, like they depict how it will go. Like 2 years ago, I saw Napoli play, and they were just not doing well. It was the year after. It was the year after they won the Scudetto, and just things where they were booing the team, chanting "get rid of the coach," all this stuff. You know what I mean? Like it's a big depiction. You know.
Yeah, and I think the influence of the ultras in the Curva is something that really is fascinating in Italian football. I don't think you get that many places. I think European football more so, whereas you look at English football, you don't really get the impact of fans on English football is seemingly not as influential as Italian and European football. As a Newcastle fan, for example, we've been through an ownership that we protested for years, but in theory, the protests didn't do anything, really. The voice wasn't there, the fans didn't really, no matter what it happened, it didn't change much, whereas I think the Italian ultras do have more of an influence. Whether that's good or bad, for depending on your thing, it is there.
If you look that post match where obviously the ultras come to the Curva, and often we thought that the first and they get that literal telling off, or obviously hopefully there's praise or what have you, but we had that infamous one the first time that we really noticed it, where it went quite viral with Milan a few years ago post Scudetto, but now we see it a lot. And after for Lazio, when we lost the derby to Roma, and I was in the third row of the Curva, and I wanted to obviously get a clip of the fans thing, and the woman next to me was like, "No, respect. You don't. That thing. It's one of those things that you're not there as a tourist. You don't take pictures." Or you definitely don't take pictures if you're in that lower part of the Curva. It's one thing as I'm going up to take a flag or to take a but generally to be a little bit more aware, which at the point, obviously, I realise, but it's kind of interesting to see. And we've seen where the players come over, and then maybe that even sometimes after some games where the fans the ultras are so frustrated, obviously they're waving them away, trying to send them on, which again we see. I think you'd see in Spain, you'd see in Italy, but yeah, definitely and the protests. Recently we had versus Lecce at home. We had the ultras boycotted, so we left obviously the Curva was pretty much, I think, 30 people. And next, the club or the ultras have called for next Friday for a ban, for another boycott. And again, because which in England would be unheard of to see people actually not turn up at the stadium, because it hits the owners if the people aren't buying the shirts, they're not paying, and they've said that they don't want. They're trying to recommend that people don't buy tickets for the Genoa game, and obviously for season ticket holders not to obviously go in.
Yeah, I think it's crazy how dedicated sort of Italian ultras seem to be to, and fans seem to be to stuff like that, protests. For example, when I was talking about Newcastle before, we had boycott, but it was essentially still 30,000, 40,000 people turning up. The boycott wasn't exactly much, but when you see a Curva boycott, fair enough, maybe you don't see the entire stadium boycott, but you see just the ultras don't turn up. That is so impactful in terms of anything. So you might still have a full San Siro, for example, but if the Curva Sud or the Curva Nord aren't there, people listen. Whereas if you have St James's Park, that's 40,000, people go, they're not fussed, and the ownership aren't fussed because the tickets are clearly bought. And I just think it's an interesting sort of comparison in terms of how impactful the Curva can be in terms of both negative and positive, as you say. So it's an interesting culture. I wanted to ask what your experience was for that. Yeah, if the team's struggling, especially where you look at Lazio's situation, for example, and Fiorentina's, for example, we've got two teams there who are going through a bit of an ownership issue, who need to obviously take a stand. And Fiorentina are struggling, obviously, down the bottom of the league. Lazio are mid-table, but their ownership at Lazio is criminal, really. And Fiorentina, obviously, are going through their issues as well. But I was going to actually ask that in terms of sort of Lazio in their current form and Fiorentina in their current form at the minute. What is the attitude sort of out there right now? Obviously, Lazio are protesting. It's essentially against the ownership. But what happens next on the Curva in terms of
so we know that they've said, say, so for Genoa they've called for a protest. The fans for every home game for the first 15 minutes is songs choreography and songs against Latito predominantly. The game against maybe it was Napoli. There was one of the games again, or maybe Napoli or Fiorentina. I can't remember which. But there was one anti-Latito song, then pro-Sarri, and so obviously the team is underperforming, the team's struggling, the players, it seems like everybody wants to leave. Sarri, you can see it's funny, online fans, some online people are complaining about Sarri again, like the sort of international fan base, but the Curva is 100% behind Sarri, and to be honest, for what he's got to work with, the transfer ban, he's doing a miracle. Like I don't think any other coach would have us as high up as we are. And he's with what we've got. That's obviously and even obviously then players being sold, they're replaced with players who like Taylor could be interesting, but in reality, like the Serbian striker, when we were linked to these other guys, you can tell that Sarri's not given the players, so he's like his hands are tied behind his back. He's just given up smoking. Finally, he's had.
He must be very stressed if he's given up smoking in this.
Transfer ban. He had a minor heart operation. Like it's a miracle he hasn't walked away. And he said that basically he's fallen in love with the fans, and that he's not walking away because of the fans. Whereas he doesn't need this in his life at his age. Yeah. So it's become quite and you can feel obviously there's that tense, and obviously against Como was crazy because obviously after 15 minutes the game was over, and even the fans are frustrated when they start to go back singing about Beppe Signori, Paul Gascoigne, all
reliving the days,
even Veron. You see an increase in singing about old legends, and more anti-Roma songs kind of kick in. Like so, it was a very obviously it's kind of a strange feeling at the moment. Like there's unfortunately it's quite, you can feel there's a toxic environment, but you can see the players, the heads are down. Like I'm hoping the players are still behind Sarri, but for definitely obviously working with Latito, I wouldn't want to do it.
No, definitely. I think. On that, I don't think this is going to happen to Lazio this season, but it potentially might happen to Fiorentina. And for the benefit of the listeners, how do you two sort of think a relegation to Serie B would affect the Curva and their attitude towards the club? Do you think, in terms of Lazio's protests, if they were to go down to the B, and Fiorentina's at the moment, if they were to go down to the B, would the Curva sort of accelerate their protests? Would they fully just abandon it until the Latito's out, for example? How does it affect that relegation? I know how it affects sort of English teams because I've been there through supporting Newcastle, but how does it affect the attitude within Italy rather than from the outside? Like how's that on the Curva itself?
For me, for Fiorentina, I think it's going to be interesting. It would be a massive drop going from essentially 3 finals, almost potentially a third at one point last year, to drop all the way to Serie B would be pretty catastrophic, because if you think about it, they're going to lose everybody. No one's going to want to stay, and that's going to be detrimental to the whole team. You know what I mean? And like they've already had their issues with getting rid of players that the whole city likes, keeping players that the city doesn't like. You know what I mean? So the Fiorentines are very vocal about what they want for the team, and I think going to Serie B you'll see a very empty stadium next year, if that's
more empty than the half-built one, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I think would happen. I mean, they put so much money into all the facilities and the teams and stuff like that, and Serie B is getting tough to play in right now.
Serie B is a very tough division to get out of. But so what's the sort of it's not essentially the ultras or the Curva would abandon their club, but they just sort of would see it more as a stand against where the club is at if they were to not turn up, I guess.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I agree with you with that, because I mean, the ultras have been super vocal to Commisso. God rest his soul. They were not very big fans of him, and they didn't like a lot of the things he do because they didn't think he listened to them, and it shows with our transfer windows. Like this one right now is probably one of our better ones in the last couple of years. but we also have gotten rid of a lot of players that we shouldn't have.
Yeah.
And it shows in the games, like what we're missing and stuff like that. So I think that's going to be interesting, but I don't think they will get relegated. I think yesterday wasn't really a good showing that they were on the up and up, but I don't see them being a relegated team, honestly.
So in terms of if Fiorentina don't go down, then I guess it'd be interesting to see what happens on the stands next season if nothing changes over the summer. I think even if they stay up, I think Vanoli goes. But yeah, it's interesting to see how the culture is impacted from that sort of relegation. I don't know what you think, Scott, about Lazio if they were to go down. What would the attitude be in there?
So just go back 1 second. So for Fiorentina is definitely an interest. And you can definitely, like Christian said, you can really see, and around the city, you can feel the frustration for sure. Like again, similar to Napoli, where a one club city has a different feel to obviously like Rome, Milan, etc. And I until I moved to Florence, I didn't realize, like when I moved to Southampton, it's funny to compare Southampton and Fiorentina, but I didn't realize how big and how important Fiorentina was until, like, I remember watching them in the 90s with Batistuta, like, on TV, but I didn't realize the impact and how important they are to the city. And I'd say that there would still be quite a big, and not big, but the ultras would still be there. But I'd say, yeah, you'd definitely see a fall off, like in the Tribuna and the other sides. But I think obviously Commisso was obviously a really sad. Obviously they knew he'd been sick for a while, but it was, and people around the club have been really hit. Like, and the people that work for him seem to speak very positively about him, and and it's crazy because, as I said, he spent like $500 million. Like, he invested a lot of money. Like, if you think compared to Lotito, who's hitting buttons, so he did invest, but as I said, it's strange. I think for Fiorentina was not backing in the summer. Who was the coach that left? The coach that left at the end of last season,
Palladino.
Palladino was I saw that Fiorentina were on their way up. Things were starting to click, but obviously they stayed with Prade instead, obviously because they had a thing, and then obviously Prade then left. But I think that was their issue. And of course, remember, next year is the centenary year for Fiorentina, so it's a huge one for the ultras, for the club, and that's part of the thing. Pioli came in as a big coach for a big personality, ready for their centenary year. So it's something that they need. And Serie B in the centenary year would be a disaster. And I have a student who's a Fiorentina season ticket holder, and he said next year is Fiorentina's centenary. It's his 50-year consecutive year as a season ticket holder. So for him, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
But as for Lotito, I see the rest of the season could easily be a push for an empty stadium, empty Curva, or possibly going forward, possibly towards the end of the season, where the ultras only travel to the away games because obviously the money doesn't go to Lotito, but obviously the fans want to support the team. I had a friend who was going to go to the Lecce game, the Lecce game at home for the boycott, because she said, yes, she hates Lotito, but she loves Lazio more than she hates Lotito. Personally, I boycotted because I wanted to stand. But when the ultras boycott, okay, I stayed in Florence. I didn't go to Rome for the boycott because my wife would have shot me just to go and stand at Ponte Milvio and drink. But again, when there is the protest, the fans still go to the game, not to the game, but they go to Ponte Milvio, and then they protest from there. So it's a big emphasis. If Lazio go to Serie B, would definitely be a disaster. And I think again we'd see a big drop in season ticket holders. Continued empty stadiums. I think or empty Curva. Possibly to see, obviously, Lotito get pushed out because he said he's not staying, and he's a very stubborn man. To put it politely, I could use many other phrases, but I won't. He's a very stubborn man. We know this, and he said that the idea is that he's going to pass the club to his son, who is obviously been photographed with a Roma scarf at the Roma women's game. He's sending WhatsApp, he's sending social media messages to ladies. Like, he's a disaster. So, like,
it's going to get even worse than by the sound of it.
This is I'm not getting any younger. I don't know how much. But like, I know that I'm aware that I'm not going to see a Scudetto in my lifetime, but or another one come. But I don't. I just hope I'll see Latito go for sure before. So yeah, it's a little bit. You can see. Yeah, it's a messy, very messy. But yeah,
I guess that leads me on to the next point. Is you talked about away games there, and obviously if they're not boycotting it, What are your thoughts on the sort of situation in Italy where you get so many away fans banned from stadiums? What is that? Obviously, Scott, I know you go to a lot of away games as a Lazio fan, but we're seeing more and more fans, like Napoli fans, for example, are very rarely allowed to travel north to any Curva. If you've got a Campagna postcode, you can't go. And you've seen recently, I know there was some issues where fans, I think it was Fiorentina and Roma, met on the hard shoulder of the Autostrada to fight, and they've now been banned for the rest of the season. What does that impact for you guys being fans of your clubs in Italy?
Well, for Juventus, I mean, I know that not a lot of teams want to go there anyway, Curvas, because they typically, from what I've read, is they have the most expensive seating for the Curva, which is pretty... that's unheard of, Usually it's not expensive to sit there, At the Maradona, it's like 30, 40 to sit there, for the Curva. I think it depends on the team or where the team's at in the season. If the team is on the up and up, the Curva should be there. And if they're not, it's pretty, it affects the team. But then if your team's at the bottom or the team's like, we're getting relegated or this is where we're at, they kind of are like understanding of it. But also some cities ban teams. I know for like City C and City D, some teams don't allow teams from regions to come to the games. Like the City D team near me, the first 6 home game or away games, no, they wouldn't even allow anyone to go. It's a lot of interesting restrictions.
It's crazy because you've obviously got the Curva and you've got the ultras and you've got the violence that we've seen recently. But there's also not just the ultra groups. There's not just them going to away games. So it affects, for example, like Scott, for example, you're going to Lazio games as an away fan, not necessarily tied to the ultras on the violence, for example. But if Lazio were to be banned because of them, you then can't go to the game. The team suffer because you can't get any away support. It's weird because in England the away support culture is massive, and it's like if you get an allocation of 3,000 and can fill 3,000, that's such a boost for a club. It's really probably unheard of that you'll see an English fan base banned from travelling away. But Italy seem to be really happy to just ban away fans from going anywhere.
It's the norm.
Yeah, and it's the strange thing because if you think first where Christian said about Juventus, so Lazio Ultras for the last 3 years I think have boycotted both Turin games, but Juventus because of pricing and policing and stewarding, Torino because of policing and stewarding, and they've already called for nobody to go to Juventus in a couple of weeks, or that they're not going to Juventus, so it's obviously up to the fans. A friend of mine, for example, she travels everywhere. They did Europe as well, home and away. And she said, obviously, if the ultras aren't going, they don't go because they follow suit. Earlier this season was a very strange, even by Italian standards, for Pisa away. So the game was on the Wednesday night or Thursday. They finally announced on the Monday that the tickets were on sale. Or maybe Friday they announced, okay, tickets are going on sale at 4:00 today. And this was at lunchtime, but then they announced that you have to buy the tickets in person in Rome to be able to get a ticket. Okay, so everyone's going to Rome, and unfortunately, I friends afterwards said to me, "Oh, you should have said I could have got you a ticket." On the Monday, they then announced nobody from the Lazio region, like Christian said, could go to the game. But when you bought the ticket, anybody could buy the ticket, okay, as long as you were in Rome. To get the refund, you personally had to go and get the refund. So it meant that obviously people from like other regions who got tickets through friends, okay, they could go. So there were like 50 away fans. Unfortunately, because I couldn't do that, I then had to buy a Pisa, because at this point I'm still trying to hit the 100%. So I bought a Pisa fan card, which was like 15 or 20 euro, plus 40 euro in the Curva next to the 50 Lazio fans or what have you. But that was a strange one. A friend of mine said like a couple of years ago, last season or the year before, Genoa often ban fans. We saw that guy, the Scottish guy from Atalanta, who was the only went to Napoli. You know, there's this element. I feel Campagna gets a very raw deal. Like even for when Lazio play Napoli in the past, that when you can change the season ticket online, for both Salernitana and Napoli, that you can't, number one, you can't change the ticket, and number two, when you were buying tickets, you couldn't buy them online. You had to buy them at the stadium or in the Lazio shop. And I like it's crazy because if you're swapping the ticket with a Tessera, you have all the details. You know, you've had to use your ID to buy the Tessera. Yeah. So I do feel they make very late decisions. And Christian said sometimes it's the club, sometimes it's the city or the comune that decides to block people. The Fiorentina Roma thing was obviously crazy. We saw Roma 2 years ago, Roma and Napoli, or I think similar, where they got a few games banned. But again, like obviously fighting on the autostrada, like obviously and obviously when they're trying to, in theory, clean the image. It was a little bit of a disaster to say the least.
What are you guys' thoughts on the intricacies of buying tickets in Italy? Obviously, you've got to have a balance of wanting the real raw experience, the real atmosphere. But to make it so hard to buy tickets for fans is commercially not viable, really, if you want to grow the sport. But also, you could go down the route where you have atmosphere suffering like you do in England, where you're losing the raw edge of the core fan group because tickets are so accessible for sort of tourist fans, which I'm not slighting them because that would be me. I am a tourist fan. If I was to go to Italy and watch sort of at San Siro or the Olimpico, that I would be a tourist fan. But essentially, what do you guys think? It's obviously really hard to buy tickets for everyone, but is there a sense that you don't want to make it so easy that it dilutes the real edge and sort of passion of Italian football that makes it so beautiful, and turn it into the more Disney-fied experiences you alluded to before, Scott? I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on that. I guess it's hard to find the balance of being really shit at giving tickets and selling tickets, but really taking away that atmosphere.
Well, for me, like being from America, like in New York, like tickets are on sale already for the whole season. Where when I moved here to Naples, it kind of got different. I was like, oh, tickets go on sale the week before the game. So like, it kind of, at first I didn't enjoy that because like that kind of makes it difficult because you can't really plan. But now I'm like, all right, I do like it, but also it makes it where, you know, it's in certain cities have different phases. But for instance, ticket one has like 10 or 12 teams. So, you know, you have multiple teams to pick from, where like the Viva ticket, which is like Fiorentina and other teams, you know, they're only like certain teams. So that part's kind of hard, but also like for Napoli, it's in phases. You know what I mean? I don't know if all teams do phases, but that part's difficult. You know what I mean? Like, and then pricing's different for every game instead of like the same essential, like similar ticket price. You know, like you go sit in the Curva one day, it's $20. The next it's 65, but then it's Champions League, so it's 85, and then you sit in like the Tribuna and it's 150. You know what I mean? Like those parts are kind of difficult, but I think it all depends on the team. Some teams don't even do online. You have to go to like a Tabaki or something like that. You know what I mean? Like there's only 2 or 3 of them that do it. You know, so those types of things kind of make it difficult for buying tickets. But I think that's what makes Calcio in Italy so unique and like kind of like makes it almost more enjoyable. You know what I mean? I mean, the team down the street from me, they're in Serie D, and the whole city was for free. They said free to the public. You know, I sent you guys a picture of it, I think, in the group chat, and there's people watching from their balconies, and it looks right into the stadio. Like the city, once the game was over, they won. the streets were flooded and like no problems, nothing. It was, I don't know. Calcio in Italy is just, it's so different. It's just unique, and I don't know. I hope it never changes because as it's like a relationship, you know, you got the bad times and the good times, but at the end of the day, like just enjoy it.
Yeah, I think that's where my thought is like everyone talks about growing the Italian game, and it would be really good to get to the point where it is competing to be the best in the world from a sporting perspective. But I also have that battle in my head of like I want the most success for Italian football as a game, as a sport, but I also don't want to open it up to become what the Premier League has become, this commercial sort of monster for the good and the bad, and sort of lose the. I take it as me being me and being really into Italian football. I take the bad stuff that we talked about and everyone goes on about as a good thing, because I think it just makes, as Christian says, the beauty of Italian football. I feel like that stuff adds to it. I don't know, Scott, you obviously go well with Lazio, but
I love the raw. As I said, I love the raw. I do love that element, and also I did Juventus away once, and Juventus. I know that Juventus fans love their new stadium, but I really didn't get a good feel. It felt, again, like before. What I was really disgusted at actually was before the game kicked off in English, they announced "Enjoy the show" or something, and I was like, "Oh my God, where am I?" And I can see how they're trying to go down that route. The tickets, I find. The short note. I know, like for the derby tickets, like they normally release it slightly earlier for us. The rest of the tickets, 7 days, 5 days, and you're waiting. But I think not. I don't mind the tickets isn't such a problem. It's the delayed or the multiple announcements of kickoff times. So you know,
like 2 weeks before most of the time they announce the kickoff, and it's planning that is impossible.
It's crazy, and again, when I think about the people who want to come from abroad, obviously with flights and things, but then also people here work and things. So for like the Genoa game, before I knew there was a boycott, obviously as soon as it was announced, which was like last week, I messaged my boss to say, could I get the time off? And he was like, I'm really sorry, someone's already off. And I was like, and it's just the way it is. It's Friday nights, it's of course. But then you've also got, because if you've also got, obviously, then are you traveling by train? So you're looking at the prices, like, and again, like I'm lucky that my missus lets me go, that she's not kicking up a fuss, all this money I'm throwing at that, literally throwing away at Lazio. So I'm okay jumping on the fast trains. But again, if you think about a normally family person in Italy where the salaries aren't great, we're nobody in it. Like, well, most of us don't earn big money, so the money that we do put into this, like, it really does make a difference. I much prefer when I travel with friends in the car. It's amazing there and back in the day. No hotels, no trains. Definitely helps. But I think the late, and especially like the last week of the last match of the season is just ridiculous because it's announced like 4 days or 5 days before. Like,
we had when I went to Verona last season, I had a friend who was a season ticket holder in the Curva in Verona, so we went out to meet him and go to Verona Inter. At the Bentegodi. Basically, what happened is we booked the trip entirely on the fact that it was on the Sunday. So we booked our flights into Milan because we couldn't get flights direct to Verona from Manchester. Changed the kickoff to 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. Italian time on the Saturday, but our flight landed in Milan at like 1 p.m., 12 p.m., 12, sort of midday. We landed and we had to drive then from Milan but it was in the car, as you say there, Scott. It was our friend who picked us up brought sort of a bag of beer. We sat in the car, drove all the way down, and then it was essentially when you get within X amount of kilometres from the stadium, the police presence was incredible as well. So you sort of drove to it, and we were still 20 minutes away from the Bentegodi, but police were stopping people. They were sort of having cars if they were sort of travelling fans or football fans off, and my mate was like, this is what happens, and the traffic was just crazy. So I guess it's just such an interesting concept of match days in Italy, especially with tickets are so hard to get. Then you've got such police presence, then you've got banning orders, you've got all that sort of good stuff going on, and it's just really a hard landscape when you're a fan travelling to Italy, but I imagine when you want to go to your club that you've loved all your life as a fan in Italy, it's even worse because it's essentially shutting out them hardcore fans half the time to make it really hard just for fans to go. And I don't know what you guys think. Do you think it's because of the image that Italian football has in terms of the violence that they're trying to combat that by being so awkward? Or do you think it's just the pure bureaucracy and the pure culture of Italy itself that it's just meaning it's hard?
Italy's a funny one because obviously bureaucracy here is insane. Like, you know, the like even when you buy, like when I'm buying tickets, probably same for Christmas, you buy a ticket, you need your codice fiscale, your tax number. Yeah. It's almost like
or fan card.
Sometimes when I go to the toilet, I need to put in my codice fiscale.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I use the bathroom? Like it's crazy, you know. But I think maybe it's to do with trying to clean up the image. Maybe this, but like similar to I'd had. And again, for the away travel, when you go somewhere and then you have the allocated parking depending on the stadium, and then the buses arriving into where you've got like your 10 buses or what have you arriving at the stadium as well. But one of my things is the wait. The wait when you're leaving the stadium is as an away fan. Because it was funny, because I can't remember if it was Chris, someone mentioned about in Verona, the wait as an away fan to expect. I can't remember if it was from Napoli or Fiorentina where they'd had like 2 hours wait in Verona to get out the stadium. And it was funny because it was the first game where we had no wait. And we were actually let out immediately, and I was like, "Oh, kind of a real surprise," because obviously because you're straight into their car park, and then we were out. But coming in, there was like fan buses being pulled over. The cops were going on checking. For Napoli away, I was kept in for 2 hours, and that was frustrating because obviously public transport had all finished and what have you. And we know that the ultras stay. The longer the ultras stay, the longer the fans are kept in for the opposing fans. So obviously it's part of the thing is for the ultras to try to stop the opposing fans so that the opposing fans miss their transport connections. So again, it's part of the fun. I had, so as I digress, coming back from the stadium, I managed to flag a taxi from Napoli, and there was already like 4 people in the taxi, and I got in and I was like, obviously Piazza del Pubblicito, and the guy was like, okay, the taxi driver was like, okay, €10. I was like, okay, fantastic, because I was like the 5th one in. I'm in the front. There's a poor American guy with a Napoli shirt. I'd obviously put away my Lazio scarf, and the poor guy, as we got out, he paid 50, I paid 10. Like, so again, obviously he must have been the first guy in, I think. But you know, and I think there's definitely obviously safety concerns, and even they don't. I think when we go back to like Christian was saying about the cities blocking, I think that the cities don't want the away fans there. That's a big thing, and that's where we see the police going in hard.
Yeah, I guess it's the cities are concerned. I guess it comes back down to the image thing. I guess if the city are concerned about away fans coming, they're concerned essentially about violence. For example, I remember I went to, because I live in Manchester, I managed to secure tickets to the Napoli Man City game at the Etihad, but I was in the away end as well. So it was really my first experience of being held back after the game. And
how long were you held back for that?
I reckon about an hour, maybe. I didn't really notice the time, but I reckon it was a decent wedge of time. And when we came, like the entire of the Etihad was gone. There was no one but Napoli fans sort of on the streets outside the Etihad. But it was like, and the reception, the announcement got met with from Napoli fans when it came over the speakers that they were going to be held back was crazy. And even then, like, we were still there just over an hour probably, and you're talking there about how ultras stay behind to make sure that the away fans sort of miss their transport. We obviously didn't have that in Manchester because City fans aren't staying back to cause problems, but it still kept like over an hour to get out of that stadium, and then obviously Napoli fans had. If you are sort of staying city centre in Manchester, it's still a decent 15-20 minute on the tram back into city centre, so then it's trying to get on a tram when there's like 1,000 Napoli fans also trying to get out of the tram back to the city centre. So we ended up just walking back to the city centre, which was like 45 to an hour walk as well. So it's crazy how it works, especially even if you're watching a team in England, never mind Italy. I can't imagine the difference as well, given the two countries. But I guess to finish on the podcast, we're at 40 minutes now. To finish on the podcast, let's make it on a lighter note. I guess, what are your favourite things about going to watch Italian football, and what sort of been your best stories, best moments, best experiences from watching Italian football in person in Italy?
Well, for me, I mean, I would say I had like two situations where last year I saw Moises Kim, his hat trick. That was really cool to be a part of. The funny part is all the gates to get in, they all shut down. So we all missed his first goal. So we're all outside watching it. Like probably like 15 Viola fans surrounding me watching it on my phone. That was pretty cool. And then probably one of my favorite ones was when McTominay scored the 2 goals against Torino last year. Kind of that game that pushed them. Essentially, that was to me. That was the game that really won them the Scudetto. So that was cool to be there for it. So I mean, those are probably two of my favorite parts that I've experienced. It's I don't know. The culture is just unbelievable. You learn about teams, which makes you learn about the cities. You know what I mean? Like I think that part really is what it is, a big draw to people. Yeah. You go places you've never been before. I mean, I never would have went to Salerno, you know what I mean? But then I went to see Fiorentina play Salernitana, and the Salernitana Ultras, I think, are phenomenal. They are the definition of a ride or die fan base.
Yeah.
I thought it was even like Fiorentina fans came in, the Ultras came in, and at the end of probably like the first 15 minutes of the first half, they came in and they were all wearing sheets on their heads with the letter B on it because Salernitana was getting relegated. So, it was one of those kind of funny situations, but
is it the ghost of the bee?
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure they do that in Buenos Aires as well, where I think was it River went down, so Boca now wear like the ghost of the bee, and they have it like
so Fiorentina came in and did that,
that's cool.
And that was kind of funny. But it was full, and even in Serie C, they're full. You know what I mean? Like they're also, it's a tough stadium to get to on game day. It's very hard. It's extremely difficult. But fan base wise, I think the Ultras are great. They're just the culture is phenomenal.
I think the culture is the main thing, isn't it? Like in England, my local team play in the 9th tier and have a really good following, the non-league, but they have a really good sort of active fan base especially for a non-league side. They're like tripling some of the attendances for the level they're in. But regardless, it's good to go down to that, but you cannot replicate, no matter how hard you try, the matchday experience of Italian football. It's just a different, like you can't, no matter what you try, I can have a pre-match espresso, then go down and try and find somewhere to get a Peroni and then go to the game. It's never ever going to feel the same as being in an Italian game. And I don't know it's obviously different when you're in Italy and not Manchester, but no matter what you do in terms of the match day ritual, it's still not Italian football. What are your favourite things about it, Scott? You've obviously travelled a lot this year to watch football, but
so there's a couple of elements, and one is the meeting people. Like the last 2 years I had the season ticket for my wife as well, but my wife wasn't really interested. It was just, and then I was like changing the name. But this year they put a block where you could only change 5 times, so I couldn't really. I was like, okay, do I want to pay €300 where I could only change 5 times, and I know that she's not going to go? So I said, okay, let's stop. And this has been a bit of a blessing in disguise, because I've been going to games alone, then I've been meeting lots of people. And it's great because you're like, especially Ponte Milvio, that before match, and I'm always seeing the same people to say hello to. There's a group of guys and girls who I then meet for a drink afterwards usually. And even like one of them, she was like, "Oh, Scott, it's my birthday. You were going here. Do you want to come out?" Nice. And I would never have met these people if I was traveling, because I'd just be with my wife and then with the Tuscan Lazio fans. But so that's been really, really good. And we've got a new ritual with a friend who is Italian who lives in Norway, but he seems to always be around. Him and a girl from Latina who I've known for years. So we meet before the game. Then during the game, we go off to our various areas. But at half time, we then meet back below the Curva for a pint. And it's because my friend Sylvia, she sits, whereas I'm at the bottom of the Curva, so I'm always the last one there. And I feel guilty because she's buying. So I was like, look, here's €20, please. Can you get the drinks on me? And I love the fact that when you're on the Curva, the guys are going around. You can get your beer. You have drinks while maybe for the derby is not so good because I maybe overindulge. But this experience is fantastic for actual experiences on like from games and things. There's two things that stand out for me, and the Bafana for Epiphany when in 2005 when the Canio derby, where obviously he was slightly controversial after the game, but the volley he scored and then going like the fact that he scored in the derby 20 years before and then he ran in front of the Curva Sud with all the Roma fans celebrating was just like amazing. And we hadn't beaten them for a long time. And that was my first derby victory. And I was in the Curva. I had literally 5 guys on top of me crying. Like the emotion at the end was just amazing. And of course, the other one, even though the game wasn't the best game, but 2013, being in the stadium to beat Roma with the Lulic in the cup final, where the two teams have only ever met once in the Coppa final, and I got a picture of a guy in Ponte Milvio who's obviously stolen a Roma Totti jersey that's been set on fire. Like just the derby rivalry is just insane, and on the side note, thinking about the ultras, the fact that, when you're at the front or you're seeing the ultras, and the ultras are obviously not watching the game, they're orchestrating that like an orchestra, where they're controlling the Curva. And we mentioned in the group recently for Lazio Napoli the choreography, and again where the week before for Verona and Parma Lazio, where before the game started, the ultras were explaining how, and we were doing warm-ups with the scarf in preparation. Like, it was crazy.
It's a show, isn't it?
Yeah. And like literally, you got from the different podiums where you got for Curva Nord, there's 3 podiums, and literally they're orchestrating. Okay, right now we're doing the scarf goes up, or then the scarf's going round, and this is just incredible and something. It's like amazing to watch and to see, and to see how efficient and And when one of the anti-Latito, we had lots of Latito banners, and I was at the back on this occasion with the Tuscan fans, and obviously the ultras are moving around the Curva, bringing the banners that people, and the guy they explained, and the guy's like, okay, yeah, I understand. And then the guy's gone off. So, what do I do? You don't want obviously not to let people down.
Yeah, you don't want to get it wrong. Yeah. Experiences. No, that's amazing. I think that's probably the perfect place to end this episode, because we've got the people, the culture that make Italian football so beautiful, and then obviously the moments, as you talked about, the goals there and the Coppa Italia final, and Christian talking about the Moise Kean hat-trick and seeing in different places. And I think that we've moved from sort of why Italian football is bad in terms of the tickets, the banning, the stadiums crumbling down, but then we've moved nicely into the fact that all of this comes together to some really nice, beautiful moments in terms of culture, travel, meeting people, community, I guess, is a big focus. But I think that's the perfect place to end it. So I just want to say grazie to you both for your time to join the first episode of the FORZA Calcio podcast. So ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao.